Okay, so let's get into it. The initial, the big shockwave from the deaths of Rob Reiner and Michelle Singer Reiner, that's past.
It has.
And now the story has moved. It's in the next phase. It's in this slow, incredibly technical, complex phase of the California criminal justice system.
Exactly. And for you, the listener, if you've been following this, today's deep dive is really essential. The case with their son, Nick Reiner, charged with their murders. It just hit its first really decisive legal stage today.
Right. And our sources are laying out these initial high-stakes charges, the central legal fight that's been building, and, the big one, what was supposed to happen at the arraignment today, January 7th.
Our mission here is to really understand why this prosecution is framed with such maximum severity and how this core conflict, mental state versus premeditation, how that sets this up for a long, long legal fight.
And we absolutely have to talk about the procedural twist today that, well, it pretty much blindsided everybody.
Yeah, that arraignment was supposed to be the moment.
The moment. Nick Reiner formally entering his plea, guilty, not guilty. And that officially starts the clock for a trial. But now
the whole judicial timeline has this massive, unpredictable wrinkle in it.
So before we get to today's surprise, we have to lay the groundwork. Let's just quickly go back over the tragedy and the immediate legal response.
Good idea.
Okay, so the core facts. They're grim, and they were established very quickly. Rob Reiner, 78, and Michelle Singer Reiner, 70. They were found dead in their Brentwood home. That was December 14th, 2025.
And we know from the medical examiner the cause of death was multiple sharp force injuries. So that confirms a knife was used.
And the timeline of the arrest, it leaves very little ambiguity about who the police were looking for.
Oh, none at all. Nick Reiner, 32, was taken into custody near USC just hours after the bodies were discovered by his sister, Romy.
She was the one who called 911.
She was. And sources confirm she immediately named her brother as being dangerous.
And that evidence trail, even before forensics, it was just intense. He checks into a Santa Monica hotel around 4 in the morning.
Using his credit card.
Right. And then hotel staff go into the room and they discover the shower full of blood. Blood on the bed. That initial evidence is just so overwhelming. It had to have shaped the prosecution's entire strategy from minute one.
Which is why the formal charges came so fast. Just 2 days after the arrest, the LA County DA, Nathan Hochman, he filed 2 counts of first-degree murder with what are called special circumstances.
And that phrase right there, special circumstances, that is the absolute defining legal feature of this case. For anyone listening, this isn't just severe. This is the maximum, right? This is as serious as it gets.
Exactly. It signals the highest level of severity the law in California allows. The specific allegations are multiple murders and the personal use of a dangerous and deadly weapon, the knife.
And what that classification does is it basically just removes all leniency from the equation.
It does. It opens the door directly to life in prison without any possibility of parole.
And the political pressure on the DA's office is, you can feel it. While California has a pause on executions, DA Hochman explicitly brought up the death penalty as a possibility.
He did. And that declaration, it immediately makes this a zero-sum game. Any kind of retreat from seeking maximum punishment becomes politically really, really difficult for him.
So the stakes just couldn't be higher. And we know Nick Reiner first appeared in court on December 17th. He didn't enter a plea then.
No, the defense immediately moved for delay. They needed to gather facts, and this is the critical part, review his mental health history.
And what stood out from those first reports was that visual. Nick in shackles wearing a suicide prevention smock. That one detail signals to everyone, the public, the court, that he was considered a risk for self-harm. It just anchors this mental health question right at the center of the case from the very beginning.
It really does. It creates this huge chasm between the brutal facts of the crime and the slow, necessary process of the law, which now has to figure out the defendant's state of mind.
So if the charges are already at maximum severity, where does the defense even begin to push back? And that leads us right into the real legal battle, the debate over Nick Reiner's mental state versus the prosecution's push for premeditation.
This is where the defense has to focus all of its energy. We know from sources that Nick Reiner has struggled for years. He had issues with substance addiction. He was prescribed medication for schizophrenia.
And had been getting mental health care right before all this happened.
Exactly. So the defense's immediate strategy is obviously to lean on this long history. They asked for the delay until today, January 7th, specifically so they could start a proper psychiatric evaluation.
And a full psychiatric evaluation, that's not a quick process.
Oh, no. It takes months. And its findings are absolutely crucial. They could completely change whether the prosecution can even realistically keep pushing for those maximum penalties. If the evidence shows, a profound break from reality, the entire dynamic shifts.
But trying to prove someone is legally insane in California it's a huge uphill battle. We're not just talking about having a mental illness. The legal bar, it's called the M'Naghten Rule Standard, is that the defense has to prove the defendant could not tell the difference between right and wrong when the crime happened.
And that distinction is everything. A successful insanity verdict means you're removing criminal responsibility. Usually means institutionalization, not prison. And jurors, historically, are just incredibly skeptical of these defenses.
They see it as a way to get out of it.
A lot of the time, yes. They see it as an attempt to evade justice.
So, okay, if the insanity defense is that hard to clear, is the more realistic goal something like diminished capacity?
That's the strategic fallback. Diminished capacity wouldn't get you an acquittal, but it argues that because of the mental illness, the defendant couldn't form the specific intent needed for first-degree murder.
Which could knock the charge down.
It could, to a lesser degree of murder, maybe even manslaughter. And that's a huge win, because it could take life without parole completely off the table.
That makes sense. The defense has to thread this very, very narrow needle. They have to present Nick as profoundly ill, but, still capable enough to even mount a defense.
And this is where the prosecution has its counterpunch, the evidence of premeditation. And the key piece of evidence for them is that reported argument, the one between Nick and his father, Rob, at a Christmas party just hours before the killings.
Right. This argument is the cornerstone for the prosecution. It gives them a timeline to argue what the law calls malice aforethought.
Exactly. They can say the argument was the motive, and the hours after that were enough time to form a plan.
If they can convince a jury that this was a reaction to a heated argument and not just some spontaneous act from a mind in crisis, then they've met the bar for first-degree murder.
But that argument is such a fascinating double-edged sword because the defense can try to flip that script, can't they?
How do they do that? How do you use that to support the mental health narrative?
Well, they would focus on the nature of the argument. They could describe it as erratic, maybe paranoid, driven by substance use, something to show profound instability.
So if the argument was just chaotic and irrational,
then it supports the story that Nick was spiraling out of control, not rationally planning a homicide.
So the prosecution says he could argue, so he understood his actions, and the defense says the argument itself proves he was incapable of rational thought.
It's a direct collision over the meaning of one single event.
And when you factor in the DA needing to look tough and seek that maximum penalty, the chance of some lenient plea deal, it seems non-existent.
Pretty much. The absolute minimum for the prosecution is likely life without parole. So Nick Reiner has almost no incentive to plead guilty to anything. This whole thing is heading for a full, very long trial.
Years, easily. Which brings us to what was supposed to be the main event today. The January 7th arraignment.
We were all expecting the formal plea, setting the timeline, getting the whole legal pace established.
Instead, we got a huge strategic shock.
The surprise was Alan Jackson, the high-profile defense attorney, just abruptly withdrawing from the case.
And Jackson is a serious player. He's represented people like Harvey Weinstein, Karen Reed. For a private attorney of that level to just walk away this early it's a huge deal.
He was brought on specifically for this, for the complexity, the celebrity profile of the Reiner case.
So what reason did he give? What did he say to the judge, Teresa McGonigal, when he asked to be replaced by a public defender?
He was incredibly vague. And he probably had to be, legally. He said he was legally and ethically prohibited from explaining the reasons why, but cited circumstances beyond our control.
Circumstances beyond our control. So the defense team, after weeks of their own investigation, just cuts ties without giving the court any real reason.
That's right. The judge approved it, and the case was immediately passed to Deputy Public Defender Kimberly Green. The arraignment got pushed back again, this time to February 23rd.
And Nick Reiner only spoke once, just to agree to the delay.
Just once.
Wow. That switch from a well-funded private firm to the public defender's office, that changes the optics and I imagine the internal resources of the case completely.
It changes the strategy immediately.
Hmm.
And we got one little clue about how far Jackson's team had gotten. He revealed that their investigation had 10 outstanding subpoenas.
And the judge sealed the list.
Instantly sealed it.
10 sealed subpoenas. That means they were deep into discovery. They were looking for records, financial data, communications. And that entire line of investigation just slammed to a halt today.
It did. The new public defender now has to inherit this incredibly complicated, high-profile case and get up to speed on whatever Jackson's team was doing. That February 23rd delay is just the bare minimum for her to even, find the filing cabinet.
It's a very high-stakes version of starting from scratch. We should also note the visible changes in Nick Reiner. He was in brown jail garb. His hair was shaved.
But importantly, he was not wearing the suicide prevention smock this time.
Right. Not this time.
Which suggests that his mental state, at least in custody, may have stabilized enough for him to be taken off suicide watch. It's a small detail, but it's there.
And through all of this, the family has maintained total public silence. Just that one statement about their utmost trust in the legal process, that is an incredible amount of restraint.
It really is.
So if we pull back, the key takeaways from today really confirm that this legal road is defined by those severe special circumstances. It guarantees maximum penalty exposure.
And the entire case is going to hinge on this debate over Nick Reiner's mental capacity and whether a defense based on insanity or diminished capacity is even viable.
And today's sudden change in counsel Alan Jackson out, Kimberly Green in it, just confirms how complex and volatile this is. And it pushes the real start of the trial timeline even further into the future, to that new February 23rd date.
It's a technical legal move, but it has massive strategic implications. When a lawyer withdraws from a case this public, it's almost always about fundamental ethical rules.
It usually boils down to a conflict of interest, or maybe the client isn't cooperating.
Or not paying fees. Things that either force a lawyer out or allow them to leave. Since Jackson couldn't give details, we're just left with those possibilities hanging over the case.
Exactly. And so for you, the listener, you're left to think about how this sudden restructuring of the defense is going to impact their ability to pursue an incredibly complex insanity defense.
Because at the end of the day, despite all the high-profile drama, the paramount issue for the court is the constitutional right of the accused to proper representation, to a fair trial. That's what guarantees the delay, what keeps the process slow, and what ensures this case will be defined by these deeply unsettling questions about criminal responsibility. That tension, the complexity of the human mind versus the simplicity of the law, that is what the new defense counsel has to tackle head-on.